I'm gonna be trying a new microphone today for this review, so if my audio sounds different, this is why. New headset, new microphone. Depending on responses and reactions, if I get any, I'll either keep the new microphone or toss it in the garbage, like the garbage it is. Anyways, greetings, comrades, and hello, everyone. I'm Quinn866. Welcome to the next review in the Anime Memories Retrospective, the series where I go back and watch and/or rewatch animes I've seen or heard of and give them a proper review. Just to quickly point out, it's been a while since I've worn Hawaiian shirts on my channel, and I used to wear them a lot, and I decided, you know what, I might as well. Okay, I know it's, October, but come on, let me live my tradition. In the very first review of this retrospective, which I originally called episodes, but I'm going to call them reviews now just to avoid confusion, I went into why the flawed execution of good concepts of Wild Arms Twilight Venom, aka WATV, made it a very mixed bag, as unique as it was. Then, in the second review, I covered the very big, massively enjoyable, and totally fun romp of Trigun. I mean, hey, it's Trigun, and it's fun. Hey, that rhymed. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm focusing way too much on that. Then, in the third review, we covered the great start to an absolutely phenomenal series, that being the Clo Card arc of Cardcaptor Sakura, which I abbreviated to CCS for convenience sake. I also went over why it's slow, but definitely holds up pretty well in today's regard. And then we covered the massively enjoyable Sakura card arc of CCS, aka Cardcaptor Sakura, which again, I'm abbreviating to CCS, and why I think it is one of the best magical girl anime arcs ever written to date. It was just really fun, really good, and you probably noticed in that video, I had to link the full thing in the description due to copyright reasons, but if you want the full story, go over to that video and click in the link in the description for the full video. And finally, I explained why, in the fifth review, Sailor Moon Classic, aka Sailor Moon Season 1, is an okay season, but definitely a rough start to a greater collective. It just was good. I mean, Sailor Moon is a series is like, and I give it the good rank, though I can say its flaws definitely show with the passing of time. Now, given how this is October at the time of scripting this, I figured I should do something a little more horror-driven this time around. It'll be a good reason to give me time to more properly analyze the second season of Sailor Moon, where it really picks up and starts becoming good. Yes, I did just admit Sailor Moon R I really liked, and that review will definitely be a lot more positive, and I'll be a lot more giddy in that review. It also will give me an excuse to delay the Clear Card Arc review. Anyways, let's start the overly long intro now.
There's something so human about finding delight in the deaths of one's fellow men. Walter.
Oh, Hellsing. Plenty of people know about this series, starring the gloriously overpowered vampire Alucard, who will go down in history as one of the best broken protagonists ever. No question, no question. He's just one of the most, in my opinion, I guess if that were the case, it wouldn't exactly be no question, but you get the point. This dude is nearly unstoppable. Now, he does have some weaknesses, but we're going to get into that during the characters segment. And I certainly am going to prove that Alucard is no Superman versus Kryptonite comparison. Anyways, not going to talk about the characters. That's for the characters section. I don't want to make the overly long intro section longer than it already is. When it comes to Hellsing, I hear many people say the much more accurate to the manga, Hellsing's Ultimate OVA series was better overall. On a few accounts, I can see why. Hellsing Ultimate has much cleaner and smoother animation coming out years later. It also follows the manga more accurately for manga purists, and the action scenes and stakes have been cranked up to 1,000,001. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a lot higher stakes than Hellsing Classic, which I'm reviewing right now. However, I think I'm gonna be the first person I've ever heard to say it. I disagree. Now, before you start begging Alucard and Integra to kill me, don't go Berserk. I love both series, and they're amazingly high ranked to some of my favorite animes out there. However, this is October, and I want to put out a solid argument why Hellsing Classic appeals to me more. I'm not saying this to be different or to surprise y'all. I mean, I tried to do that back in my old channel with all my old rankings, but they were oh so obviously grabbing for attention by saying hot takes intentionally to try and grab fans. Like, the fact that I put Mega Man X2's Agile as my favorite Mega Man X boss was me oh so desperately grabbing at straws. However, I am genuinely saying it this time. I am genuinely and personally going to admit I prefer Classic a tad more than Ultimate. Now, they're both amazing. If I were to say either of these were bad, I'd be lying. Classic just appeals to me more in a few ways that Ultimate doesn't quite provide. Now, Ultimate, again, is still great, and Ultimate has stuff over Classic. Plenty of it, in fact. However, as a collective, I think Hellsing Classic, or Hellsing 03 as people call it, but I call it Hellsing Classic to avoid confusion, just fits more of my style and more of what I wanted out of the anime. Of course, I will review Hellsing Ultimate later on in this retrospective, since that series is amazing in its own right. For now, though, I want to properly defend HS Classic, since as someone who's thoroughly enjoyed this series, I feel like the fanbase is a bit harsh on it at times. I mean, I saw Glass Reflection, Arcada's review of Hellsing Classic, and I feel like he didn't really go into about the strengths Classic had, except for the music. I mean, one of my main things that I think people complain about a lot is Hellsing Classic isn't that accurate to the manga, and that's another reason why people prefer Ultimate, but I don't really buy that, people. I mean, people actually really enjoyed, from what I heard at the time, HS Classic, which is what I'll abbreviate Hellsing Classic, and I'll abbreviate Hellsing Ultimate to HS Ultimate for convenience sake. I remember at the time, according to various sources and wiki articles, and people I've just talked to around the street, they enjoyed HS Classic when it came out. However, the second, and I mean the second HS Ultimate came out, people just started comparing it more and more to Ultimate in the manga and started throwing critical remarks that kind of came out of nowhere for me. Now, I'm not saying there are not a lot of that opinion, and definitely seeing Ultimate probably helped them, but I feel like it's not really fair to compare a lot of the things people do between the interpretations, especially if we're coming out years apart. Of course, certain details will fall under that category. However, not everything should fall under the different interpretation years apart prerequisite. Like, for instance, the animation is obviously going to be targeted, since animation from 2003 is gonna look different from animation in 2009, with the tools provided and the expectations set. That much is different. However, the sound will not be touched in this regard, since musically, anime has remained very consistent over the years. I mean, I've said it before, I haven't seen an anime, at least many anime, that have a quote-unquote bad soundtrack. However, since we are in the intro section, I should probably talk about the intro. This intro, oh man, this intro is just, oh my gosh. Before I even got my hands on the DVD of this, the only intros in anime I outright loved, even though I said I enjoyed WATV's introduction, it definitely wears thin here and there. The only intros in anime I outright loved were the Devil May Cry anime openings, Trigun's, Bobos, Death Notes, and Gun X Sword. Now, when I saw this intro, this is when, for the very, very first time I ever said it, this intro is near perfect. Of course, my favorite anime, and my personal vote for the perfect anime, Gun X Sword, still has the better intro, but I'd be damn lying if I didn't say Hellsing Classics came close. And yes, I did just claim Gun X Sword is the perfect anime, and we will inevitably cover in this retrospective. Until then, just know that it's really good, really fun, and holds up remarkably well for its time, doesn't give into a lot of cliches, and the fan service is kept to a minimum. Yeah, I just love Gun X Sword. Don't judge me. It's amazing. Shut up. Go watch it for yourself. I will defend my claim that it's perfect until the end of time. Anyways, back on Hellsing Classic. The intro music. Just the intro music. Mwah! Chef kiss. The World Without Logos is a brilliant song. So much so, I actually went online to listen to the full song, believe it or not. And I never did that except with Death Note's opening one. This song just makes me want to flail my head to the sheer awesome melody. Have intros with this good music and you know you've made a right decision. In fact, the whole soundtrack is great, but we will get to that during the audio section. All you need to know for now is the intro music is divine. I also love the images here. The character designs fit excellently, the backgrounds are appropriately fitting, the visuals are also fairly smooth for 2003. 2003 this was! For a mere 13 episode series, this intro also has some clever little details in it. Yeah, I mean, the little details in this intro give me a reason to watch it for almost every episode. Yeah, you just heard me correctly. I've said it before, most intros I skip after a few episodes during my binging sessions. Of course, I'll always open up with the intro on my first binging session of a day, but I'll usually start skipping past it when I get a few episodes in, since I like binging multiple episodes per session. Even during some of my favorite animes, that's the case. Not Gun X Sword, but still. However, this anime is an exception, since it just really amuses me. The intro's subtle details can only truly be pieced together as you watch the story. Now, of course, you could always skip it for every time, then make the connections afterwards, but that makes the puzzle less satisfying, since it's really satisfying to piece it together as the story is being told. The little details in this intro are both direct and subtle, and feel satisfying to notice if you watch it at the time. I won't point out all of them, since I feel like I'd be spoiling every story. However, I'm going to be spoiling the story in this review anyways, but for now, I'll just point out a few little details. And if you want to actually watch this intro yourself and comment down below what you noticed, thinking I may have not noticed something, or put out a different interpretation of something, please do. For now, the details I will point out are: the dog symbolism. Here, Obs refers to Alucard swearing his loyalty to his human master. We also see he has both guns, despite getting the second one in episode 5, and in this shot right here, we see most of the main cast flash in the background, even a few of the villains that haven't been introduced in episode 1. This is easily the best intro we've covered thus far. I'd watch this in a heartbeat over WATVs, Trigun's, even though it's one of my favorites, all three of CCS's despite the variety, and even Sailor Moon's, as iconic of an opening that is, this intro just nails it. The visuals are really smooth, even if the animation's a bit rocky, but again, this is 2003, you gotta let that slide here and there. The music, track through World Without Logos, brilliant, and it's appropriately entertaining for a mere 13-episode series. Now, I've rambled way too long, but this is the overly long intro segment, and it's become tradition at this rate, so you just gotta deal with that. With that aside, I shall now properly begin explaining my case on why HS Classic appeals to me more than Ultimate, starting with the characters.
Master. They need to be judged and punished by man's law, not by us.
Now, this is something both shows excel at, for different reasons. The characters are all simple from the start, yet get deeper development towards the end. At least that's the case for Hellsing Classic. To me, at least. For most of the characters. Obviously, no, there are a few exceptions, since in Ultimate, it actually does capitalize on developing characters that weren't as developed in Classic. Ultimate actually gave them a lot more screen time, specifically Alucard and Walter, but Classic overall definitely had it better when it came to the main cast, to me at least. I mean, in Hellsing Ultimate, they speed through a majority of the characters' stories and struggles, and heavily relied on you as a viewer knowing their stories from the manga or classic anime. Now, granted, HS Ultimate is completely watchable without this, but it really enhances the experience of Ultimate if you know this. And it's kinda trash considering Ultimate advertised itself as a remaster. Now, it's still good, but still. Like, if they advertised Hellsing Ultimate as an expansion of Hellsing Classic, that'd be fine, but they consider Hellsing Ultimate like a remaster, and usually a remaster would go back and improve upon things already established, but instead they rush through it, and that's why Hellsing Classic kind of enhances Hellsing Ultimate, making it effectively and fundamentally not a remaster. Now, there are improvements to the characters in HS Ultimate. Like I said, Alucard and Walter especially got it better there. However, in case of other characters like Sir Integra, or Ceres Victoria especially, kinda got shafted in this regard. I mean, Ceres Victoria in both adaptations acts completely different, as they took away a majority of her struggle, which was brilliantly set up in Hellsing Classic.
Gareth, take the shot.
However, in Ultimate, it's more like...
Police girl, how does it feel now that you're a vampire?
You're too loud, police girl.
Now, as funny or cute as that scene is, it's definitely trying to masquerade the fact. HS Classic and also really switched up who the protagonistic character got the most focus. In HS Classic, Ceres Victoria was the main focus, while in HS Ultimate, Alucard was more focused on. Now, okay, I know that both covers advertise Alucard as the protagonist, and again, that's all fine and dandy, but I really argue Ceres is the protagonist for getting a lot more screen time, more struggle, and a better arc in Classic. In addition to the fact that, is it really out of the ordinary for a story to have two primary characters, the main girl and the main guy? I mean, come on. And I mean, it does actually cleverly make the cover a lot more interesting, rather than just slapping on the overly sexualized female character to get a bunch of horny weebs involved. They slap on the badass dude. That's a way to stand out without resorting to fan service on the cover, so I'll give it that. Now, to be fair though, I'll begin with Alucard, since really, despite Ceres getting more focus in Classic, Alucard is at the end of the day the main character, whichever way you look at it. Alucard is a very badass vampire, rocking the red coat, slick hat, absolutely snazzy shades, he's got 2 guns, and an entertainingly awesome, great voice provided by Crispin Freeman.
What a perfect night.
And you know the series has the rule of cool completely behind his back. Ironically, unlike most other vampire stories, he's not some berserk killing machine who attacks indiscriminately, nor is he a totally and absolutely cocky bastard who only fights those he deems worthy. Being bound to a human master named Integra, the head of the Hellsing organization, he's got it all behind him for being brutal, but does tend to hold back when Integra demands it. At the end of the day, he's a very simple vampire for a simple story, and now, usually I'm not into vampire stories, since plenty of them put vampires in romantic situations, which results in cringe. Boo! However, the anime honorably does not give in to fan service, since canonically they give Alucard no true romantic interest. Now, fans might be able to interpret his actions and words with other characters in weird ways. However, this is not the focus at all, as there's plenty of little examples either pointing towards or against certain romantic implications. So the shippers, if they want, can analyze those details and pick at them, while the story listeners can lay back and listen to the story while ignoring the romantic implications. So there's enough in that balance, and that's actually a pretty good strength this anime has. However, Alucard's personality just really doesn't lean towards romance in any way, if you ask me. More often than not, Alucard just has this smug, overconfident attitude that rarely wavers. Nor does it really show any massive emotional changes. Now, granted, he has let his emotions slip here and there from the cool dude persona from time to time. However, he only really explodes emotionally when his opponent is worthy, he gets disappointed, or when someone he values is in danger. His personality is more about just being arrogant and amused at the humans and all who are below him, but viewing it from his eyes is pretty fascinating. He just looks down on others for making poor decisions. Despite being bound to a human master, he does see flaws in humans and doesn't hesitate to speak with his own vampiric pride. Now, I have heard people say Alucard is very simple, and okay, he is. Alucard is, again, as I said, a really simple character, but I don't really think that's that big of a flaw. I mean, I've heard several arguments that are not in favor of this, even from my brother, who I said before participated in the sibling anime tradition I spoke so much about. Now, I never watched this with him. I actually watched this only recently during the pandemic, both H's Classic and Ultimate. I kind of just watched it on a whim during the pandemic, then asked him, and he said he liked it, but Alucard was just too overly simple to be a proper protagonist. And to that I say, absolutely he is, but that's not a bad thing. Sometimes being overly simple can be a benefit, much in contrast to being overly complex can be a flaw. I mean, sure, simple characters sometimes lead to predictable moments, but in Alucard's context, this works wonders. Let me explain why. I know there are countless vampire stories that take themselves way too seriously than they need to. They usually have some big drama revealing a vampire is a part of some infamous lines of creatures like Dracula himself or whatever bullshit. Now, yes, that is the exact twist they pull here, with Alucard being another form of Dracula, but it doesn't come off as redundant since they don't make a big deal over it with gasps and over-the-top screaming. The series is kind of cheesy, but it doesn't exactly shy away from that. In fact, it kind of embraces it while not breaking its badass character. That's what makes this work. Plus, even if plenty of us knew the Dracula twist was coming, there is some ambiguity. What led Alucard/Dracula to this point, between then and when he was forced in the Hellsing organization, remains mostly up to interpretation. So there is mystery elements for people hankering that desire. Now, they do explain that the original head of the Hellsing house, Abraham Hellsing, managed to best Alucard. Rather than killing him, they offered to let him kill in their name, thus effectively owning him. Though, the interesting thing is, they don't say how he managed to beat him way back when. It's clear the Hellsings are capable of killing vampires back then and even to this date. However, given Alucard's difference from a standard vampire, it really does make you wonder how on earth Abraham managed to do this. Now, they don't explain it, but it's not a big problem. See, it's mystery, but it's not losing any points, and it's not required to know the exact method Abraham used. All you need to know is they did so, and that's why Alucard serves them. It's simple, but it does have subtlety to it. Though his power, I will admit, is something I gotta give to the fanbase, though. Yeah, not gonna lie, I think Alucard could have benefited from having a few more weaknesses. He does have some. He's bound to Integra, who limits his power output. He takes damage and pain from holy weapons. Emotional damage is probably his biggest one, and overconfidence especially. However, this is not enough for most fights to be remotely a challenge or even interesting, at least for him as a character. Sometimes, even the viewers can be let down since we don't really know if the villain has something they can pull, since Alucard's just so overpowered. And it makes 85 of the fight scenes more lopsided than they rightfully should be. As energetic as cool as some of them later on can be, it definitely takes away a lot of flair the anime could have had to pile on top of the already cool stuff it has. Alucard is a good character and a fine vampire protagonist, which is not something I say often, though his subordinate Ceres Victoria just works so much better as the primary focus. Alucard can still be a main protag, but Ceres and Alucard together create an effectively equal duo, which works better in the long run. Which is another reason why I prefer HS Classic, since they gave Ceres way more to go off of. Let's cover her now. Ceres Victoria is more complicated than Alucard, but she's still fairly simple at the end of the day for an anime clip. At least at the start. She was a policewoman who got caught into some trouble when on a mission with a priest gone bloodsucker mode in Cheddar. She gets held hostage only for Alucard to kill the priest vampire, wounding Ceres in the process. He offers to save her life, but this comes at the cost of becoming a vampire, since she was bleeding too much at that point. Therefore, her only recourse of living was to turn to the night in order to gain the vampiric ability of regeneration. She accepts this offer, now working under Alucard at Hellsing, while learning her new vampiric traits, while struggling to remain human. And, okay, I hesitate saying that because automatically that sounds actually cringy, but it works. It's actually pretty dandy here. There have been a lot of corny vampire stories with true vampires wanting to be human. Hotel Transylvania. But here, having a human forced into a vampiric life while trying to stay human is a unique little spin on this concept. I like Ceres Victoria more due to being the primary focus in HS Classic, being weaker than Alucard, having relatable moments, and just being a fun female character who isn't there just to be fan service. Now, there are times with fan service, but really though, these are a lot less than animes nowadays, and the fact that animes are just bound to have fan service here and there is not a big complaint, since it's not exactly overdone in Hellsing Classic. Ceres being the focus also gives her way more time on her struggle to remain calm. She actively resisted the urge to drink blood due to the addiction coming along with it. But eventually, she does need to drink because if she doesn't, she'll become weak and be of no help to the Hellsing organization. We see she doesn't drink until the end of episode 4, and we saw her countless times to avoid doing so before then. Addictions are a very human problem, so I appreciate the message they're trying to deliver here. This was something HS flopped at in that regard. Sure, Ceres got a romantic interest, but you have to remember, giving her a romantic interest comes at the cost of... No! Senpai! No! I love you and I'll drink your blood! While also removing... I need to do this to survive, but I don't want to. I know, if I go too deep, I'll get addicted. What's the right choice? What's the right path? Yeah, it's clear which I obviously prefer as a character arc, though Ceres' vampiric abilities were handled much better in Ultimate. And as much as I do like Ceres not fully tapping into her vampiric abilities, so she doesn't become just as badass as Alucard in Classic, her abilities in Ultimate were just so cool. As much of my thoughts on Ceres in Ultimate remain pretty disappointed, I will admit they did handle her powers much better. And yeah, that even comes at the cost of scenes like this that try to be funny and are on the first watch through, but after time you start to realize they just don't fit with what Hellsing goes for. I mean, Hellsing always had kind of a bit of humor in it, but it was a lot more subtle. Like in the scene of HS Classic, where they give Ceres her new weapon, which is literally just a giant frickin' cannon. Now, of course, that's weird, but they do it because vampires get enhanced physical strength. It's obviously not like, ha funny, and they make it all direct with cartoony animations, like they did in Ultimate, but it's a lot more subtle, and kind of funny even in Ultimate's variation. Ceres's voice actor is great. I love how all of the English voices in both adaptations of Hellsing get accents. Given how this takes place in London, more details to come in the world section, it's so nice to see characters have proper accents. More details to come in the audio section. I don't hate Japanese voices by any means. In fact, I don't hate any voice at all. It just doesn't exactly feel natural to have Japanese accents slapped onto characters born in England. Now, if the characters themselves were Japanese, that'd be a different story, but they're not. That's regardless the point, though.
It just... that didn't happen. Captain Garrett.
Ceres's VA did a great job portraying her emotions, struggle, and the accent blends well. And even during Ultimate, the humorous scenes were dubbed well for her, so credit there. She's a great protagonist, and much like Alucard, specifically in Ultimate, she starts simple but gets way more development by the end. Alucard got way more development in Ultimate at the cost of no development here, and Ceres got more development here with her development being rushed in Ultimate. Now, on to Integra Fairbrook Wingates von Helsing. This woman is excellently written. As the head of the Hellsing organization, she's very no-nonsense in her mission to defend London from these unholy demons. I've always liked a strong female character, and Integra is a perfect example of this done right. She's charismatic, wise, can hold her own if need be, and has a low tolerance to bullshit, as Robin from Anime America put it. Now, she does only fight in Ultimate, truly, but she can still hold her own in HS Classic, even if we don't see it on screen very much. Real talk, Integra is my favorite character. Now, maybe that's 'cause I'm a sucker for domination, but if you would just wait 1 second, Sorry about that quick side tangent. Whatever. Well, I just revealed a lot about myself there. Integra is a rare example of a strong female character done right, with almost no unnecessary fan service or flaws. Now, granted, there is still some due to the main villain and whatnot. However, I'll take it over what they did in Ultimate.
They're eating my people.
Now, for the last of the main heroes, we have Walter C. Dawnes, the quaint and cool butler who is equally as entertaining as the rest of the cast. Walter C. Dawnes. For the most part, he remains behind the scenes as a worker in info gathering and weapon customization, in addition to being a loyal butler of Integra. However, they do mention quite a few times he had been on the battlefield in the early episodes, and you wonder why. That's until episode 6, where two of the main villains, the Valentine brothers, Jan Valentine with his brother Luke Valentine, stormed the Hellsing house, forcing Walter out of retirement for the time being, and showing why he was called the Angel of Death. And we get to see an excellent flex as he absolutely makes a mockery of Jan Valentine. Now, okay, to be fair, I preferred Walter in Ultimate by a long shot. Much like Alucard in Ultimate, Walter in Ultimate was much better handled, no question. I mean, Walter's still entertaining in HS Classic, he's just better used and handled in Ultimate. And I think, in all fairness, a few of his lines, though, were better delivered here. Like when Jan Valentine says this taunt over the intercom.
Now while you're waiting for us to kill you, we highly recommend pissing yourself, followed by a course of praying to your impotent god, then cowering in the corner and begging, always good. But if you act now, there's still time for an old-fashioned suicide! Thank you, London! We love you! Good night!
Given how Jan Valentine said such ludicrous words to his master and all of the other members of the round table, when Walter sees him, he gives him a good old-fashioned gentlemanly roast.
I most highly recommend pissing yourself, followed by a course of praying to your impotent god.
Yes! Pure gold! Now for the main villains. HS Classic has several low-power vampires who appear for most of the orders. Much like how Cowboy Bebop has different episodes called sessions, or Devil May Cry's anime episodes are actually called missions, Hellsing calls their episodes orders. Now, the main group of threats consist of the Cheddar Priest, Paladin Alexander Anderson, the Valentine Brothers, Laura, Paul Wilson, and Incognito. The Cheddar Priest is the first threat and the one who got Saris caught in all of this mess, appearing as early as episode 1. He's manipulative, dark, and goes down quickly as most first episode villains do. Not much to cover on this guy, really. I mean, he works as an early threat, and he's plot significant for bringing Saris into this. Nothing more, nothing less, and that's all I can really ask for. He does what he's supposed to, and doesn't outstay his welcome, with a satisfying death in the first episode. Short, sweet, and simple. Alexander Anderson is the complete opposite. He is very story significant and acts as the Virgil or rival figure of Alucard. Almost literally in a sense, since we got a red-coated demon with guns fighting a crazy dude with summoned swords. Alexander Anderson is one of 2 characters who could have beaten Alucard. In HS Ultimate, he was the only true one who matched him in terms of raw power. Maybe if the captain faced Alucard, he'd maybe stand a chance, but we won't know since, well, in Ultimate, Alucard doesn't fight the captain. Now, the reason why Anderson is one of the few people who could have beaten Alucard is because he is human. Alucard always claims, since he's a monster, the only true person to defeat a monster will be a man. Alucard disposes monsters like trash. However, when a human opponent appears that's truly worthy, he shows honor in battle, and really, you can't really blame him given the fact that it was because of Abraham he got put into servitude. Anderson is the loophole in this logic. He became a regenerator after going under some crazy scientific process years ago, effectively making his body not wither, but retaining his human beliefs and mind. This means, 1, he will get that mercy honor from Alucard, and 2, he has the raw power to beat him with a much more durable body. In both versions he's good, but once again, I'm giving Ultimate the win here, since despite Anderson having good fights in both series, having a fun role, a phenomenal voice, he gets more closure in Ultimate, which is good, since he kinda scurries off after the second battle in episode 7 of HS Classic, only making minor appearances and not really getting a full closed arc like he did in Ultimate. Not only does Ultimate give us the final battle and a great death, but Alexander Anderson was just way more developed in Ultimate. In HS Classic, he was there just to be the rival of Alucard. Sure, it had tension between the organizations of Asgard and Hellsing, however that only really lasted or was even really brought up in episodes 3 and 7, so it felt a bit contrived. However, in Ultimate, we see he's not as crazed IRL in comparison to Battle. We see he cares for the kids at the orphanage of his religion, though a massive gray zone arc resides in with his hatred for those who would deny God in favor of any other religion, regardless of they're human or not. We also see that Anderson is old in HS Ultimate. During a flashback with the Bishop Maxwell, an already old character, was a child who was abandoned by his parents since he was the product of his father in an affair with a mistress. We see Maxwell as a child, but Anderson looks just as old as he does in modern day, making you really wonder how old Anderson is, given the fact that Maxwell is quite withered. This shows the regenerator experiment had occurred long before the series' first episode, and also does a good job at justifying his line, Iskari has been hunting vampires centuries before Hellsing existed, quote unquote. Yeah, despite me preferring Classic by a sliver, Ultimate gets Anderson, Alucard, and Walter especially right. And again, I do think in Ultimate he was better, however in Classic he does what he's supposed to and has good fight scenes. Next on up are the Valentine brothers. These two are very entertaining. I mean, they work as some of the more fun villains, ironically. They work off each other cleverly. I mean, they're polar opposites despite being bros. The older brother, Luke Valentine, is very serious, level-headed, takes things calmly and quietly, and is much more focused on the work end of things.
It's from a special ops group. They claim to be experts in dealing with vampires and ghouls.
Yeah, I saw them on TV. What's up with that shit?
It's high time we stopped all of these territorial pissing matches once and for all. Don't you agree, Jan? Shut up. This stream of drivel pours from your mouth before every job. Can we just this once try for quiet, focused, and cool?
Yeah. I got it. Same old shit. I know. Fucking A, bro.
Failure is not an option.
On the other hand, the younger brother, Jan Valentine, is the exact opposite, contrasting to this cool nature with a laid-back, explosively fun, enjoying his passions to the point of arousal, and treats everything like one giant game.
Already this far.
You know, the security in this place is so fucking weak. What to do? Old people's blood tastes like shit, but it's no fucking fun if I just shoot you. Down. Left, right. Bring in the motherfucking death by Konami.
I love that reference. Ironically though, I'm split on these two crossbow versions. I much prefer Luke in Ultimate for numerous reasons, but Jan was a bit more fun in Classic. Regardless of a few flaws, these two dudes are great. Their loyalties in Ultimate are revealed to be with Millennium, but their loyalties in Classic we won't truly know. At least not for sure. Now, you could argue they were loyal to the anime-exclusive final villain Incognito, but I disagree since Alucard has been shown to extract info from his prey, given how he did that thing to Luke.
Nothing but dog food.
This is story significant because, as shown in Hellsing Ultimate, and even during a few scenes of Classic, Alucard has the means to gain info when consuming his opponents. However, given the fact that he clearly consumed Luke and still doesn't know anything about Incognito, leads me to believe that either A, Luke didn't know his true loyalties, or B, Alucard found out who he was loyal to, but it wasn't Incognito, so he didn't say because it wasn't important. Well, regardless, it's not a big deal. Again, there is some ambiguity to it, so whatever. Coming into the near finale villains, Laura is another simple villain. She's a vampire who possesses mind-altering powers and was sent by the big bad Incognito to turn Integra into a ghoul. She kind of acts as a rival for Integra, but HS Ultimate did it way better since the main villain of Ultimate, the Major, was a way better rival to Integra while also just being a much better villain in general. Laura uses her mental powers and manages to deceive the Hellsings into thinking she's Integra's lost sister, and even manages to briefly turn Walter against Ceres, but thankfully Alucard saves the day, killing Laura, freeing Walter, and, well, Integra still has to go into the hospitalization due to having Laura's blood enter her, but she thankfully does live by the end of the series. Not much else to say about Laura. Probably the weakest of the main villains, ironically. Also, she puts Integra in fan service positions. Continuing our list of main villains is Paul Wilson. He's a pretty good rival to Ceres. Much like how Ceres Victoria is a servant vampire of Alucard, Paul Wilson is a servant vampire to Incognito. Unlike a majority of vampires created by bites, these villains had these chips implanted in their bodies, making them vampiric without the need of a bite. Most of the vampires were manufactured by this scientific chip in HS Classic, but that's a topic for another time. Back to Paul Wilson. He appears in dreams mocking Ceres for not drinking blood, which he did instantly, after Incognito offered to save him when he was a dying soldier by turning him into the vampire role. In a pretty disturbingly long scene of Paul Wilson on an altar, clearly drunken and dazed, trying to fight Incognito's control, tempting him to give into vampiric nature, but he eventually gives in. Paul Wilson only fights Ceres once at the very end, but I like how in Classic, despite Ceres not unleashing her powers to the level she did in Ultimate, she manages to beat him with her Halconen cannon, proving vampiric power isn't everything. His wolf form also might have been partially inspired by concepts from the Captain in HS Ultimate, but that's a massive hypothesis. I think Paul Wilson's a good rival to Ceres, since really, in Ultimate, HS Ceres didn't really have a rival in Ultimate. She had fights, yeah, that were more dramatic, but no one that clearly rivaled her as much as Paul Wilson did in HS Classic. And now, since Hellsing Classic's runtime actually ended before the manga series ended, it had to introduce an anime-exclusive final villain. Now, automatically, for a lot of people who know how these goes historically, this can be a turnoff. However, Hellsing Ultimate is a good example of an anime-exclusive villain done right. The great big final threat, Incognito. He is a well-played final villain and a good example, again, of anime-exclusive antagonist done right. Now, I obviously prefer the Major in Hellsing Ultimate. There's just no question, the Major is a much better final villain, rival to Integra, and is honestly just more entertaining than Incognito. However, this dude has a lot going for him that the Major doesn't. For instance, Incognito is not human, like the Major. Now, the Major was obviously smart, but he didn't match Alucard on a power level, thus making Incognito the only other character, apart from Alexander Anderson, who was even close to defeating Alucard. And Incognito is also a true vampire, and much like Alucard, he's bound to a human master, who is implied to be the Major, but we won't know for sure. Incognito does a few things better than the Major in some areas. For instance, as I said, he had enough raw power to hold his own, but it goes farther than that. Incognito's weapon, the Armscore MGL, that fires dark needles, is uniquely similar to Alucard's guns, the Kasul and Jackal. This does a good job of setting his arms apart from Alexander's blessed bayonet blades. Another thing Incognito got right was his plan. Now, the Major is way more evil and hateable than Incognito. There's no questioning that. I'd be lying if he was. However, ironically, Incognito was much closer to winning, if you ask me. That is especially apparent since he did way more with so much less resources than the Major. In fact, apart from charisma, Incognito is more powerful in nearly every other regard. Now, the Major's still more well-written, Incognito has a lot more abilities than the Major. Again, the Major's still a better villain, no questioning that. However, the Major's plan required so many things to achieve his end result, which was just killing Alucard. Okay, the Major enjoys war in Ultimate, but he did the war because he wanted to kill Alucard. But that's kind of the thing. Incognito did more than that, with less resources. I mean, the Major had an army of 1,000 Nazi vampires. He waited 50 years. He required a doctor, a traitor from inside, revving up Iscariot into the three-way battle, a cat boy, mechanical enhancements, sacrificing his own men, taking an enemy boat, military equipment, and his own life just to beat Alucard. Incognito got closer to winning and doing more with a single squadron of maybe about 50 vampires the Major could have plowed through. He had Laura to put Integra and crutches for the finale, Paul Wilson to get inside of Ceres, and the legendary Demon Set. Incognito not only managed to, 1, cause a lot of damage to London, which, okay, was nowhere near as desperate as the damage he caused with the Major caused, but like, it still shows when he had Ceres, Integra, and Alucard all nearly dead, when really, In Hellsing Ultimate, Ceres was really the only one in danger. Now, she was still, powerful, but she hadn't been quite fine-tuned to her powers. Incognito is also a genius. And, okay, even if the Major was more charismatic, Incognito's plan was brilliant. The Major was more evil, and we got to see how much more dread his plan caused, but Incognito not only managed to kill off several soldiers employed by Hellsing directly and indirectly, he also managed to get Hellsing labeled as terrorists by London's Round Table thanks to manipulating the doubts of a Judas representative who infiltrated their ranks. See? He didn't need a mass army to do this. He had a single squad of 50 or so vampires that could, again, be wiped out by the Majors easily, yet he turned the London army, which was already established, against Hellsing. There's no need to make vampires. Just have the army that uses them go against them. That's brilliant! Incognito is also portrayed as a sadomasochist. He enjoys giving pain so he can receive pain. And I like how Alucard keeps fighting to find a worthy challenger, and Incognito's desire to exchange wounds being far more sinister than Alucard's just, I want to fight someone worthy. Overall, he's a great foe and an excellent challenge who managed to give Alucard the fight he desired, more or less, apart from Anderson in Ultimate. Robin from Anime America said Incognito put Hellsing in a near hopeless situation, and I agree. I mean, sure, the Major bombed London, but they could have escaped to other countries. It wasn't likely, but that possibility was still out there. But here, Hellsing can't just run away from their employers. They're going to get tracked down, and they're going to get caught. Thankfully, the Queen of England knew there was a Judas amongst the Round Table, but for that part of the story, Hellsing just betrayed the trust of London in their eyes, and that put them in a desperate situation because they can't just kill the people of London. They're innocent. That goes against their mission. Incognito was pulling the strings at that time, so it would be hard to defend themselves against London and Incognito. Like I said, the Major was a better villain overall, but Incognito's strategy was just genius in its own rights. And Incognito is also a good representation of Nosferatu, like how Alucard is a good representation of Dracula. Now, I've covered the main characters for a really long time this time, so let's talk about the world.
No, you're even less than garbage. You're just scum. And that ridiculous costume. You look like some sort of sad carnival freak. Just look at you wearing those priest robes. Don't you have any shame? I thought scum could at least feel shame.
Now for the world. Okay, given how this is in an anime and it tries to take place during real life times, it obviously is going to be a lot less supernatural than something that takes place in a fictional world. Though, there are still supernatural feelings in it with the vampire characters using their power in these places. It does what Sailor Moon did to a little bit of an extent, where using powers in places that don't exactly feel magical suddenly makes them feel magical. And I'll give credit, London's a good setting for this story. It definitely sticks out more than a Japanese town. The more stone and medieval feeling also gives it tons of identity. It does have a fair variety of locations across almost every episode, starting with the first. I mean, it begins at some rich dude's residence, then cuts to the investigating offices, transitions towards the police camp in the woods, then when Alucard hits the scenes, the woods become a lot darker, the sky turning scarlet, and finally the encounter with the Cheddar priests in the church. I mean, the backgrounds are fantastic, and visually, it does the job nicely. And that's really it. I mean, the backgrounds and world are good. They're good representation of London, and definitely stand out more for something that tries to be in a real-life place. I'll give it credit, it's a good world. I'd put it above Gunsmoke, Juban, and Tomoeda, but WATV's Fall Gaia still reigns strong as the best world. Visually speaking, at least. Which leads us into the visual section.
My one-on-one with the great Alucard. It's time you found out just how good I really am. You're pretty fast.
Okie dokie, time for the visual section. I've already covered how the opening looks really smooth, which also has that fantastic music. However, visually, this is 2003 anime we're talking about here, and it's bound to have gaps. Background-wise, the series is great, as I stated in the world section. They're all foreboding, cool, light, or dark whenever need be. The use of shadows is also very creative. I like how Alucard's eyes are usually covered by his glasses, but we still don't see his eyes since it's covered by the shadow of his hat that casts over the top portion of his head. The camera angles are also pretty unique a lot of the time, and the character designs are just as cool as they should be. However, when it comes to the animation, it's quite rocky. Okay, I'll admit 2003 isn't the newest, however, there were some good looking animation in 2003 and even before that, and I'm a little split on the animation. The funny thing is, well, the standing still shots are usually okay, and even the slower scenes are okay, but the moving animation, especially during the faster scenes, is quite jagged, and that's kind of unfortunate, sadly. Like in episode 1, when Ceres mistakenly shoots Alucard, it goes kind of for this jagged, jittery animation, but that looks good, because it fits with Hellsing, given the fact that it's uneasy, and you don't really know if Alucard's gonna attack Ceres or not for mistakenly shooting him. That's all fine and dandy. However, in episode 2, they do a similar looking shot that looks off. I mean, okay, the special effects are good with the petals and the cape flowing, but if you look at this scene, it just looks so off. I mean, Alucard looks like a scarecrow in that position, and his body proportions are wonky. And this happens quite a lot too, which is really unfortunate. If it were more subtle, like in Fullmetal Alchemist 03, another anime in 2003, I'd be understanding, since plenty of times, at least in Fullmetal Alchemist, you kind of would have to go out of your way to intentionally pause the video and point out inconsistencies. However, in Hellsing, these are noticeable, and they don't exactly blaze through it, and they kind of roll with it. I mean, they have balls to show their bad animation, but the amount of times this happens is way more than I'm willing to justify. I mean, there are times that appear and look cool, but it's just... how else can I describe it? Take this appearance in episode 4. It looks weird. Like, it's almost like they just rotated Alucard off of the ceiling. And I know it's not a big problem since later on in the same episode, he has an appearance that looks much better. It's still a little jagged, but it still looks okay. I mean, it's not awful, either of these, but it definitely stands out. And I mean, that kind of works, I guess, given what Hellsing goes for, but it's just like, what? Remember how I said I actually loved Walter's roast during his character description? Well, Walter's face during these scenes and during whatever he does as Angel of Death gig are a little bit creepier than I'm willing to admit, not gonna lie. And in the second fight with Anderson in episode 7, he has a really crooked smile here. Kinda weird. Facial features were a bit wacky for Luke Valentine in Order 6. During the scene where he blows up the helicopter with the fire in the background, it looks cool, but for God's sake, I mean, seriously now, his forehead here is bigger than Apollo Justice. And like, I know this isn't a problem since later on in the same episode, when he points his gun at Alucard, his forehead and facial features look a lot more tolerable. So what went on there exactly? Ceres Victoria, when she goes bonkers for a bit, has a really toothy grin that does not fit, regardless of the fact of her going berserk. And what are there a few other examples? The crowd in episode 5 of Soldiers is clearly just the same soldier reused with a rocking back forth animation mirror to give it the illusion of a crowd. And when Ceres drinks blood, she's like la la, moving her shoulders up and down, and it doesn't look like she's eating. I mean, CCS had better motion shots, and that's a show about a 10-year-old magic lolly. So what's going on here exactly? This makes that look like the Mona Lisa. And okay, granted, CCS's motion shots were great looking, but you know, there's just more newer anime. But CCS was made before this, so what is it with this animation? I mean, I get it, you know, there's, you know, great animation nowadays, and CCS is kind of fallen flat from those standards, but it still looks better than this, which came out years later. I mean, I can't complain too much, I guess, but I mean, Hellsing Classic is a product of 2003, and it sure feels like it, but that's not to say there aren't good motion shots, and even then with the whole 2003 argument, there was still stuff cleaner looking before this. I mean, WATV had better animation, and that came out in 1999. Okay, it was re-released in America in 2002, but I doubt they changed the visuals when coming over to America. But there are still good motion shots in Hellsing Classic. Like in Order 3 Sword Dancer, when Enrico Stivoletti, the minor vampire, wakes up, starts slaughtering the hospital guards and patrons. That looked pretty good. It looked cool, and it wasn't exactly the most fast-paced motion shot, but it still had motion in it, and it was still pretty smooth, so that's good. In Episode 1, Alucard cocks his gun with his mouth, and that was pretty cool, but again, it's just him reloading a gun in a cool way. Not really much of a motion shot. And in Order 3, during the first fight with Anderson, there was actually a pretty good shot of him crossing blades, staring down at Alucard, then going in for a few swipes and rushing before stabbing Alucard before he shoots back. That was cool. And even during the second fight, there is a similar shot where he throws a Bible, only then for its pages to ravel into tentacle-like tendrils. Don't take that out of context for any of you hentai people out there. And it wraps up Alucard, thus trapping him, allowing Anderson to do a pretty cool slice with both blades across the train, effectively tearing it in half, then laughing in an appropriately creepy, jagged laughter that strangely fits. And okay, this animation may not look the cleanest, but it works, but man, it definitely shows, and I really don't know what happened here. I'm no animation expert, but Waterarm's Twilight Venom had cleaner animation, and that was shown as early as the intro. I mean, even the intro animation for the moving shots of the intro of Hellsing Classic was kind of jagged. I mean, okay, the intro, I gave compliment to the visuals, but even the movement in the intro of Hellsing was kind of sloppy, so I don't really know what to say here, guys. I mean, it's better than Sailor Moon, for sure, but given the year this came out, this kind of feels like something that would have came out around the time, and it's a bit longer of a year gap than I'm willing to justify or properly defend. I mean, things like Trigun and WATV had cleaner animation. Okay, maybe Trigun standstill shots were weird from time to time, but the movement in Trigun was fairly consistent. So why? This is 2003. Okay, I get it, not everything's going to be perfect, but Hellsing, given its action, these motion shots don't really do it justice. Like, take for instance the final fight in Trigun. The motion shots there looked great for the time. I mean, this looks really, really good. I mean, sure, there are a few weird faces, but that's not too big of a complaint since other animes suffer from that. Now compare that to the final fight of Hellsing Classic. Look at this shot right here where he holds this demon. He's got this bouncing, jagged shot of him jumping around laughing, his lips not matching his voice lines, and the camera zooming in out. It's actually really cheesy. Now, this could be justified with a single reason I have. Like I said, this is a horror anime, given it called Hellsing, that's about a badass vampire. So, a few of these shots can be justified with the it's horror, it's meant to look scary argument. And I'll accept that for Walter's face during his roasting, because we got to see a new side of him. The same thing with Sarah's Victoria when going insane. However, things like Luke's forehead, Integra's robo-walk in episode 1, and Incognito's bouncing laugh really cannot be defended by that argument. Like, the visuals are still okay when it comes to the slow stuff and standing still, but the movement is It's very questionable. And again, I don't think they change animation overseas since WATV looks the same sub versus dub, so yeah, I mean, the visuals are a mixed bag overall. The standalone shots are fine, the moving scenes are mediocre. Though I am a sucker for it, so I'm willing to take it. Though I can imagine a lot of people being off-put by this animation. It's really not the cleanest. And for 2003, you'd hope it maintain quality with stuff previously, but it kind of takes a step back. But with that all aside, let's go on to the section, the audio, where we'll be covering the sound, dub, and music. And like I said before, that amazing intro music. Aww.
Not only do they threaten my men at the Tower of London.
I've already mentioned the intro music long enough, and I think it goes without saying, this entire soundtrack is amazing. Easily my favorite selection of music in any review we've covered so far in this retrospective. Yes, even surpassing CCS. I've said it in the previous reviews, I haven't personally seen that many animes with an outright bad soundtrack. In most cases, there's an anime that has mostly good tracks, some that are forgettable but still okay, and some that are just kind of not into my taste, but collectively, there are very few animes I'd say that had an outright bad soundtrack. And I'm saying that as a whole, all the music tracks, the ones I like, don't like, the ones I listen to, the ones we don't listen to, the ones that are unreleased, the ones that are credit themes, etc., etc. But overall, this anime soundtrack, I don't even really know how to describe it. I mean, without saying stuff I've already said. I mean, normally I talk about, how it has a bunch of variety for fitting this scene that's happy, this scene that's sad, this scene that's fun, this scene that's angry, this scene that's action-packed, this scene that's slow, that's scary. I normally go on a tangent about that, but I really feel like it goes beyond that. Like, the instrumentation, for instance, has a wide collection of pianos, guitars, even church organs, and that really fits the vampiric nature. I mean, it has a ton here, people. Normally I do the over-the-top ramble or comparison describe the music, but I'm just gonna let Glass Reflection here say it for me.
Like this show right here just has this style to the music that's just so much. Yes!
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. I mean, there's just no other way to describe it. HS Classic has a phenomenal soundtrack. I said in CCS that serves as in my top 25 anime soundtracks, but with this being better than that, you can only imagine how much higher that makes it on the list. Given how this review is long as it is, let's just go into the other audio bits and not stay on the amazing music for too long. The sound effects are brilliantly fitting. They have the slow and dark fury horror sound effects befitting of the horror genre, and when the action bashes in, it's explosive, loud, and impactful as it should. Much like the music, there's not too much to say here since sound effects are about as quick as they come. Now, the voices. The dub is one of the best in anime history, no question. I say this as someone who defends dubs as well. I see there are so many people that are like sub loyalists. They're like, just watch the sub, blah, 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 blah. And I think I'm one of the few people that actively prefers watching dubs. Now, okay, if an anime isn't completely dubbed and it won't be finished, therefore the sub is the only way to get the later episodes, obviously I'm going to prefer the sub for including the full story if not all the episodes are dubbed. However, if a story is complete both sub and dubbed, I'll give them both a fair chance. I argued WATV was better subbed, which I'd never quite directly said, and while I'm at it, I might as well say for all the episodes, or well, reviews, which I prefer. For WATV, go the sub. The Japanese voices are just much more tolerable, and the video file is easier to find. Trigun, dub, no question. CCS, dub. Sailor Moon Classic, do the Viz dub. Hellsing Classic, dub. Anyways, regardless of my personal expectations, I really do like this dub. It's just good. The actors unanimously turned in good performances. Alucard's voice is kick-ass and gruff. Ceres Victoria has the right blend of determination and doubt, while also in Ultimate having a good touch of comedy. Integra is excellently honor-driven with that Ice Queen feeling. Once again, thank you, accents. We need more stuff of this in anime. Just saying. Walter is calm and collected, even in the midst of battle. The lower power vampires are all overly demonic and flare dramatically. The Cheddar Priest is cunning and manipulative. Alexander Anderson is great and really holy, really getting to his crusade persona. Jan Valentine is having way too much fun with his lines, and I love his deliveries. Luke Valentine has this cold demeanor, then he switches over to Panic when he got, well, turned into dog food, as I showed earlier. Laura is soft and suspenseful. Paul Wilson is sneering when in humanoid form and more snarly when in wolf form. And Incognito is appropriately deep and evil like the villain should be. I mean, I don't really know many people who prefer the sub of Hellsing. This is a perfect example alongside Cowboy Bebop of a dub done better. Now we can finally cover the story and pacing.
You've run out of your puny man-made bullets, blessed with the power of your puny god. Clever bastard.
I had previously mentioned each episode is called an order due to the majority of the series following a mission-based format that ultimately form into a greater story. However, unlike other animes that pull off this kind of thing, like Cowboy Bebop, the story almost always goes somewhere with little to no filler, regardless of it diverging from the manga. This is why both structure-wise, it's good in staying faithful to what it tries to be, while also being unique in a little bit of a way. The characters don't connect the dots until the very end, but it is entirely feasible to connect the dots as you, the viewer, watch the series. The Hellsing organization, led by Integra, hunts down any demonic threats that dare plague to danger the Queen of London's crown and the protection of the people. Having a vampire at their fingertips, Integra sends Alucard for the difficult missions while training the soldiers, and Ceres, for lesser missions so they don't just rely on Alucard. On the way, they do detective work with the police on the chips and plan the targets, making them vampiric. Butt heads with the Ascari organization, help Ceres come to terms with what she's become, find Alucard a worthy challenger, and stop the mess Incognito and his unknown master orchestrated. It's fairly simple and easily the quickest story to describe in a nutshell, but it gets the job done, and it kind of needs to be this way, given the fact that this only ran for 13 episodes, and making an overly complicated series would have been risky. Now, okay, this has been done before with Cowboy Bebop and Trigun, but WATV is an example of this failing. I'm glad it's simple too, since, as I said before, they don't make it feel redundant with the vampire drama, since they don't make it complex and over the top with, "You're Dracula!" Ah! But, since it's so simple, it doesn't come off that way. Now, however, before I get to the main point of this review and why I really defend HS Classic, I have to ask, are there a lot of true horror anime out there? I'm genuinely curious here. I've seen horror animes before, but they really aren't that good to me. Honestly, I mean, they lean more towards murder and crime scenes, or just having blood splattered everywhere, which is unsettling, yeah, but it becomes null by the fifth time it appears in a single episode. Most of the best animes that had horror in it was a side element and not the primary focus, and I'm saying this because Hellsing Ultimate definitely leaned towards the action-filled romp, with horror kinda discarded. I mean, it lingers in left field, but it oh so clearly goes towards action. Now, Hellsing Classic feels way more horror-driven. And okay, Hellsing Ultimate's action scenes are way better. No question. Better animation, better villains. The action in Ultimate is great. However, Hellsing Classic had some good action in it, even if the animation was wonky. But Hellsing Ultimate completely threw away any of the horror it had. I mean, really, Hellsing Ultimate's only real horror moments were really in the first episode. That was the only thing that really felt like a horror story. And after that, just kind of faded. I know this isn't coincidence since the first 2 episodes of HS Ultimate are essentially quick retellings of HS Classic to fill in newcomers. But it went for a big in action approach, which is fine since, again, HS Ultimate has superior action scenes. But it really discarded the horror and character struggles in the process. HS Classics had way less energy and a lot worse animation, but it was still okay in concept. The horror balance also made plenty of these action scenes invest me more emotionally. It's like I said earlier with tons of animes opting for the let's make a scary yandere who's completely immune to karma or be a threat until the very end where she maybe dies, but only revives at the very end to actually be able to be dead and go and kill and it's like they go for something like that and have blood constantly spilled to gross the viewers out. And okay, having a scary yandere that's karma immune until the end, or having blood spilled everywhere, can be scary, but overusing it makes their impact far less meaningful, nullifying any fear the viewers could have had once they get used to it. HS Classic knew when to slow down the visuals, audio, story to make the next big action scene feel fresh. HS Ultimate is bloodier, but by the end, you really get used to it, since all of your scares are really focused on other stuff if you expect it. I mean, if the anime relies on blood and guts to be its main source of scaring, then that's kind of a shit horror idea, since it makes the action fun, but the horror makes it so lackluster. Here is my main point here, and the main reason why I prefer Hellsing Classic. In addition to being a better horror story, something that fits October, and something that horror animes need, Hellsing Classic works as a good horror anime. It's not directly horror, but it has the feeling of one. And this is the main point. Apart from that, source material consistency does not always equal better by default. You can have an anime that does not follow the manga, but it still turns out better. And I feel like HX Classic is given the hard end of the spectrum in this regard, since it tells a story with a much better balance and horror that make the action scenes, as wonky as they can be, feel fresh. At few times, Ultimate kind of dragged even during the action scenes because the impact of blood and guts was so much less impactful that far in. It's just, you can't question this, guys. HS Classic had more horror to it. I mean, it had better pacing, that's another thing. Had better pacing, deeper dialogue, more horror befitting the vampire tag, and character development that was spread fairly to make you invest yourself in these characters and how they'll get out of the action scenes. You won't just invest them because of whose side you're on, you invest them because you like them as characters. And again, the main point is it's more horror driven, and it's an example of being closer to the manga does not always equal better. Now, with that rant set aside, let's go over the episodes/orders themselves, as they really are simple at the end of the day. Order 1, The Undead, is a good start. I'd rank it above Episode 1, Sleeping Dirty of WATV, and Episode 1 of Sailor Moon especially. However, Trigun and all of CCS's arcs, including the Clear Card arc, had stronger elements for series starting points. It begins with Alucard easily taking out a female vampire who posed as a prostitute for some rich dude. Alucard eliminates her before she can cause havoc in his residence. Then it cuts to Integra, talking with the investigators about their mission and laying out the world in any of their details, setting up this story. Then it cuts to Ceres Victoria, who is trying to support her dying police force comrades before escaping when seeing them become ghouls. Ceres meets Alucard and retreats into the church before the Cheddar priest attempts to use her. But Alucard intervenes, proving the trash vampire, as he puts it, is not worthy of being called a vampire. Demonstrating his power, he gets an excellent flex on this psycho. The Cheddar priest is defeated, but Ceres Victoria is mortally wounded in the process. Offering Ceres a deal to live human live as a vampire or die retaining her humanity, he gives her the choice. Accepting to become a vampire, she accepts it, now becoming employed by the Hellsing organization and serves under Alucard as an apprentice. It's a fairly decent starting episode, though it's nothing to cry dramatically about, although it's still good in its own rights. Order 2, Club M, does a good job at showing Sarah's Victoria unsure of her stance. Starts out with a woman named Kim getting lunged on by a lone vampire, and Saris hesitates to snipe it. Another sniper kills the vampire, saving Kim, but Saris is having a hard time coming to terms with reality. Commander Ferguson and Captain Gareth act as good seniors in these scenes. We also see Walter talk with Saris, showing her a new room. We get eerie cutaways of bloody scenes of houses and dead families, with ominously cutesy music showing our new threats of this episode, the teenage vampires, Leaf and Jessica. These two rascals are killing since they enjoy it, and they want more power by drinking blood. Heck, there's even a blowjob scene. Okay, it's off camera. Just wanted to point that out. We see Saris resist the urge to drink blood on the table even when she wakes up. Alucard manages to defeat Leaf, like the scumbag dude he is, causing Jessica to run off, though Alucard purposely lets Jessica run off so Saris can take the shot. In this moment, Saris learns with her new vampiric abilities, she can see farther than the human eye and see in the dark, allowing her to kill Jessica, proving she's not a threat to the crown and officially letting her into Hellsing. Better than episode 1, but it's good. Not great though. Episode 3, Sword Dancer, is a significant leap up in quality. It shows a foreign student named Enrico Stivoletti and his lover Mick, who are both vampires. Mick is near dead, but Enrico wants to try and give some of his blood to save his lover, but is caught before he can save him. Once again, I appreciate the gay representation in anime. The episode also shows the chips for the very first time, as Enrico has been shot trying to prevent him from turning into the vampire. They surgically extract the chip to try and stop him and analyze it, however, he of course wakes up. This episode has Alexander Anderson sent by the Vatican Iscariot Division to do the deed since Enrico is from their country, therefore they feel the need to be the ones to kill him. Enrico wakes up, causing havoc, but he slaughters plenty of the hospital patrons before Saris, Alucard, and Gareth hit the scene. Saris is about to kill Enrico after the ghouls were slain, but Gareth is suddenly killed by Alexander Anderson, who didn't want him to interfere. Saris is wounded by Anderson in the process, and this starts a brief but good first survival fight between Alucard and Anderson. Before it gets any worse, Integra manages to arrive just in time, with word from the Archbishop to call Anderson back now that Enrico is dead. His mission has no further jurisdiction in their area. Anderson leaves but to promise to finish their battle later. This was a fantastic episode, which is good for its placement early on. Order 4, Innocent as a Human, does an okay job trying to slow things down from the action the first 3 so far. It shows why Hellsing prefers to keep their operations a secret from the public eye. At the TV station, Kim, back from Order 2 Club M, is shown working there, clearly still uneasy about her encounter with a vampire back then. A new captain named Stedler is put in place of Gareth. He takes over, clearly not getting along with Saris, and they go into a place for a usual ghoul sweep only to be realized someone is recording them. The person, who doesn't get a name, but an alias in the universe called Flesh. Flesh was doing this for a few reasons. Turns out he was recording this for some snuff film business online, and he also did this because he was sending it to a news station who promised to pay him a lot of money. When searching the files, they see as a video of Gareth's dead body being used on camera. Using the data from the computer, and with Saris speaking with the investigator, Harry Anders, she manages to piece together Stedler and Kim conspired using Flesh to try and warn the world about the vampiric danger. Flesh did it for the money, Stedler did it because he didn't understand why Hellsing keeps their deeds a secret since they should be proud, and Kim did it since she felt angry Hellsing kept us under wraps. Flesh was supposedly let go for not knowing, Gareth is arrested, and Kim was killed by Alucard. The ending shows Saris finally drinks the blood, and yeah, it's good. I mean, it's definitely the worst episode thus far, but nothing too bad. I understand if fans dislike it, but it does a good job at showing Saris. Order 5 Brotherhood gets back on track. with the Valentine brothers planning an attack on Hellsing when an agent managed to infiltrate their territory. They uses dead bodies as a way to send their message. The public in London is worried about the recent vampire rumors, and Integra has a meeting at her mansion with the other Round Table members who want to come up with a plan for suppressing the info, since Integra's actions have seemed too showy recently. The episode also has Ceres get her signature weapon, the Hull Conan cannon, while it gives Alucard his other weapon, the Jackal handgun. This provides some funny dialogue with Walter. Ceres is sent with a squad of Hellsing soldiers to help an emergency call, who is really just Jan Valentine setting up a bomb trap. Ever gladly, Ceres manages to get everyone out there, and then the round meeting conference begins. However, Luke and Jan raid the house, forcing Alucard, Ceres, and Ferguson, and the other soldiers to hold off the armed ghouls working for the Valentine brothers, and it ends with Jan putting Ferguson in a very dangerous position, effectively making this a two-parter, and a pretty good one at that. Order 6 nicely continues off of Brotherhood. The action is more fast-paced, the drama is high with every character being surprised, Luke and Jan have good lines, Walter gets to show us why he was once called the Angel of Death on the battlefield. It's just a great episode. Now, I've heard a few people complain about Luke Valentine being a letdown, since he was so confident and calculated at the start. However, once Alucard started winning, he cowered, making the rest of the fight lopsided and really not that interesting, since he became really incompetent after that. And I understand wanting more than Anderson as a challenge this early on, but I'm not throwing chairs over it. I'm actually surprised Anime America put Luke Valentine in number 2 of the most incompetent anime characters. I mean, he did stuff right, it was just his death that was a big letdown. Though the dog finisher was pretty brutal. Jan Valentine and Ceres fighting Walter is the real focus after all. We see Ceres go crazy for a bit once Jan sets things up so that when he needed backup, the corpses of the dead Hellsing soldiers would animate into ghouls. This caused Ceres to be emotionally struck since she doesn't want to kill her comrades, but her insanity takes over. Integra manages to shoot Jan with heated bullets to get info out of him, but he commits suicide before they can reveal their master. Overall, this is an excellent two-parter. Much better than the Roof Lab episodes in WATV, on par with the Sand Steamer part of Trigun, and outshines a few of the two-parters in CCS plus Sailor Moon. It certainly does opt for a higher action approach, but there are a few horror elements with the spooky mansion. Order 7 Duel now, a great follow-up after the two-parter. It opens up with the Round Table forcing Integra to kill off some of her soldiers turned into ghouls. Integra feels bad for doing this, and it shows. Not only killing her subordinates, we see the families mourning at the graves. Ferguson is thankfully okay, coming off with a few injuries, however there were a lot of casualties. Ceres is out hunting ghouls in the city alongside the remaining soldiers. Integra gets a letter from the Iscariot's leader, Maxwell. Of course, being disgusted by the nerve of Maxwell trying to make peace after Anderson overstepped his boundary during Order 3, she doesn't trust him, and rightfully so, as Maxwell had Anderson appear in the subways for another heretic slaughtering, as he puts it. Ceres gets caught up in Anderson's sight, forcing Alucard to approach him and have the rematch they desired. Integra is fierce with Maxwell, using the Iscariot's Paladin Anderson to take advantage of Hellsing's weak state. We get a great fight scene in the subway between Anderson and Alucard manages to best him, but Anderson put up a bit of a bigger fight this time. Sadly though, Anderson retreats, and that's the last major time we'll see him. Integra manages to force Maxwell out of London via intimidation. And again, sadly this is the last appearance of Anderson in Classic. However, seeing Integra walk home super pleased by getting to flex on Maxwell was a pretty satisfying moment. Order 8 Kill House gives us more exposition to the freak ships. It also shows Integra hiring mercs to take place of the dead soldiers from the Valentine brothers and Alexander Anderson's attack. Ceres for the first time goes back to her empty house. Harry, the investigator from Order 4, returns to extend his services to Hellsing out of pity for what had happened. Using his many contacts, he manages to convince a lone, docile vampire named Helena to give him more info regarding the chips. Helena is another anime-exclusive character, and I like how she's a vampire that's just kind of sitting there in limbo, not really caring or wanting to drink blood or get involved with violence. Integra, meanwhile, has a worrisome vision. Then we see, at the very end, our main antagonist Incognito in the distance. Alucard senses his presence before he leaves and tells an Integra a worthy threat is quickly approaching, thus starting the climax of the story. and effectively showing Helena and a few of the other anime exclusive characters like Paul Wilson, Laura, and Incognito are only going to be appearing in this story. It's good and nice, and again, fits the climax actually quite well. It's not the most action-driven episode, but for an exposition episode, it was actually pretty good. On to Order 9, Red Rose Vertigo. It keeps a fairly consistent pace. It starts out with Hellsing being interrupted from a mission on stopping some ghouls in a castle. We also see the birth of Paul Wilson, who will act as Incognito's servant, much like Ceres is a servant to Alucard. They do, again, show a pretty brutal long scene of the chips entering his body. It's kinda scary, not gonna lie. A vampire named Laura manages to manipulate the Hellsings, save for Ceres, making them think she's Integra's sister. Alucard is out to find Incognito, which he does. The two exchange some dialogue, showing that they're both true vampires who serve a human master, which, again, we don't know Incognito's true master, given the fact that this is anime exclusive. However, once Alucard thinks he's just about to enjoy the best fight of his life, Incognito ever malevolently reveals he set this up, so Alucard would have to abandon this fight to save his master Integra. And for the first time, we really see Alucard break character as he shows genuine fear and anger for his master's safety as he teleports back to shoot Laura. Unfortunately, some of Laura's blood entered Integra's wounds. Integra, using a dagger, cuts her wounds open to further bleed out all the impure blood so she won't turn. The group rush Integra to some doctors in hopes they can save her. Now for Order 10, Master of Monster. It cleverly goes into a flashback dream sequence as Integra is being patched up. It shows her father, Arthur Hellsing, who was the previous owner of the organization, handed down the missions from Abraham Hellsing, is about to die. However, before Arthur perishes, saying Walter will help the young Integra get to terms with her position, the uncle, Richard Hellsing, is jealous. His brother Arthur handed down the leadership of slaying the vampires to Integra, who is a mere child. Richard goes as far as to decide he will kill Integra to take the role himself, regardless of family ties. Integra manages to sneak down to the basement where she finds Alucard, who instantly realizes her as the spawn of his master, Abraham Hellsing, the one who put him in servitude of the family. Killing Richard shows Integra's will to become stronger and how she trusts Alucard as she wakes up from the surgery all fine but is gonna be in a wheelchair and or crutches for the rest of the series. Everyone's glad Integra's alright, though the very last shot of the episode ends with Incognito arising his 50 ghoul squad for the next phase of his plan, and a pretty cool scene for Incognito. The music also is befittingly demonic during that scene as well, so yeah. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. Order 11, Transcend Force, brilliantly starts up with Paul Wilson mocking Ceres in a nightmare, questioning why she refuses to drink blood and gain power. As Ceres wakes up, she feels the need to do some more investigating. Integra, however, orchestrates a plan to draw out the enemy to a false location where the Round Table Conference will be held to fake out Incognito. Ceres goes back to Helena to ask why they don't drink blood, only to see Incognito himself had eaten her. Literally, no joke. Before she can resist, Incognito deems Ceres not a threat and merely laughs, vanishing away, telling her his plans, saying this is exactly how he wanted it, hinting he expected the Hellsings to react this way. Ceres, seeing the danger and worry of Incognito predicting this, now must rush back to prevent the Hellsing soldiers from going to the Round Table's fake location, and it's admittedly pretty tense. Alucard is clearly amused by this, wanting to go after Incognito, and Integra is very unsettled. Again, Ceres goes out to warn each other, and Helena is dead, and it perfectly sets up Incognito as a hateable villain and a decent threat. Now for Order 12, Total Destruction, which mainly focuses on the great big final clash between the Hellsing mercs and Incognito's ghouls in London's SAS trooper gear. This caused the public to label Hellsing as terrorists who they think are attacking SAS soldiers, causing the military to intervene. Ferguson is killed by a soldier, however, Ceres, seeing the senior die, takes her Halkonen cannon to fight off the rest of the hordes, in a pretty satisfying scene. Alucard begins his fight with Incognito, while Integra, with the help of Walter, manages to get away from the guarded Hellsing house to try and get to the tower. Ceres has her fight with Paul Wilson and manages to defeat him, which was really satisfying, and I really liked how Paul Wilson was defeated not with vampiric power, but with the same gun Ceres had used, which was really satisfying, proving you don't need to drink blood to beat others who are more powerful. Back with Alucard and Incognito, he manages to give Alucard a hard time, making him waste his bullets. As Ceres arrives to back up Alucard and give him more, Incognito manages to blast her with demonic energy, thus setting up for the last bit of the story. Alucard was also wounded by the demonic blast as well, so that definitely puts you on edge. Order 13 Hellfire is a great finale. We see Integra get notified by the Round Table messengers that the Queen has deduced a Judas is in their midst and manipulated the information on the attack. Integra will be defended by the Queen for all damages after the trial. Meanwhile, Alucard, trying to kill Incognito before Ceres drops to the ground weakened, gets a literal, and I mean literal taste of his own medicine when Incognito manages to use his own silver bullets against him, striking fear into Alucard and mortally wounding him. Ceres drinks the blood of what she thinks is her dead master, but Incognito tells her it's no use. She manages to get outside before Incognito can capitalize. Walter, being chased by their helicopters, manages to get Integra to safety, but he's wounded in a helicopter crash. Incognito, using Integra's blood, reveals he will revive the legendary demon Set to grant him the power to destroy everything, which is what his master wanted. You know, that does kind of fit the Major now that I think about it. All is lost until Integra finally releases the seal on Alucard's greatest power, allowing him to absorb the blood of the fallen beings of the tower, effectively reviving him. Ceres gets Integra to a safe location as Walter's carried into an ambulance. The last strike has Alucard use a melted cross to impale Incognito, who sees who Alucard really is. As the lifeless body of Incognito is hung, pierced from the roof as a warning to all vampires, we see that the Judas Priest was caused and Integra is about to be led out for her trial where the Queen will defend her. Some people aren't exactly a fan of this ending. I mean, it ends on a good note, but it definitely has a few open ends that could have been tied up maybe a little bit better. Okay, I do admit the ending isn't quite as exactly rounded out. It's a conclusive ending. It's a good ending, but it does leave a few questions. Nothing too big, but definitely a lot of open-ended questions, as small as they could be, that can make you think, well, I want more, which can be found in the manga and Hellsing Ultimate. And okay, I do admit, you know, we know that the Queen is going to defend Integra and she'll get out of prison. They said so before. But Alucard appears before Integra offering his blood, so Integra could become stronger so something like this doesn't happen, offering her a choice similar to Ceres. Integra merely smiles amused, and it cuts to black. All in all, Hellsing Classic nailed the horror. It wasn't always direct, for sure, and I will admit there are other animes that definitely dive into bigger horror themes, but it obviously has more horror in it, whether it's direct or hinted, than in Ultimate. Order 1 obviously was supposed to be scary, with Ceres struggling against the Cheddar Preschools. Order 2 had those ominous cutaways with Leaf and Jessica's victims. Order 3 had Enrico trashing the hospital, nothing but a towel. Order 4 had the raid on Flesh's bug building. Order 5 had Jan's bomb trap. Order 6 is more action-oriented, but seeing the Hell House in a desperate state was tense. Order 7 had Anderson nearly beat Alucard. Order 8 introduced Incognito. Order 9 showed us a really creepy scene of the chips entering Paul Wilson's body. Order 10 had the flashback with Integra as a child. Order 11 had Helena die. Order 12 had so much violence, which worked late on. And Order 13 was a high-stakes, action-filled final battle. And overall, Hellsing Classic is a brilliant experience. Same thing with Hellsing Ultimate. That's also a brilliant experience. And yes, Ultimate did a number of things better. However, Classic appeals to me more as a horror entry in anime. Maybe it's because horror isn't really that scary in anime, or there's not a lot of good horror animes I've seen, but I would have been scared by this as a kid if I watched this during the sibling anime tradition. I mean, I've always been kind of a softy heart, but I can imagine myself being uneasy by this. HS Classic is an important mark in the series and the legacy of Hellsing and horror anime in America in general to me. It's entertaining with its interpretation of the story, and like I said, the main theme of this review is manga accuracy is not always better automatically. That's the biggest point I'm trying to drive here. Your anime does not have to follow the manga word for word, and I have plenty of examples that apply to this, not just for anime and manga, but for source material versus new adaptation. Like, how do I even describe it? Let me put it this way. It's like video game animes. I feel like people give many of them, or not even just video game animes, video game TV adaptations. Most of them go off track with what the video games had. What's a good example? Like the Devil May Cry anime. People complained about it feeling out of place since Dante really didn't do side missions, but I liked it because the anime was a good place to explore what if Devil May Cry had side missions. The characters were relatively the same, and okay, yeah, Patty was maybe a little bit out of place, but she worked. And people complain about it since the Devil May Cry anime was not faithful to the source material. However, in other cases of anime that was really faithful to the source material, like the Persona 5 anime, I liked it. It was a really good retelling of Persona 5, but for some reason people hate the Persona 5 anime despite it gives those source material purists almost exactly what they want. But they're like, oh, it doesn't do this dialogue option. They skipped over this confidence scene. Like, okay, of course Persona 5's anime is gonna gloss over things. One, because Persona 5 is a role-playing game. They're not gonna have Joker say the same lines you said in the game, so they give you multiple dialogue options. Furthermore, Persona 5 is a 90+ hours game. It's 100%, and they can't squeeze 90+ hours in a 25 episode series with a 2-part movie. That just doesn't work, so they're gonna gloss over stuff. And I absolutely hate people that do this. And I think it makes, animators really sympathetic because they can either animate something new and people will complain it's not faithful to the source material, or you can make something that's really faithful to the source material, but people get mad at it for being a watered down synopsis of what happened, and they just complain about that. So there's really no winning, and that's why whenever I judge something, I don't put expectations from other adaptations, at least from a story standpoint. Now, animation-wise, sound-wise, mythos, lore, I get that. But you can't judge a new adaptation on source material alone. That can be part of your argument, but that can't be the main complaint, and that can't be the only reason to give something a low score. And that's why Hellsing Classic is getting a high score. I'm giving Hellsing Classic a 9.4 out of 10, which, if I recall correctly, might just be the highest score of any anime in this retrospective yet. 9.4 out of 10. I'm Quinn866. Have a good one.